and we'll get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Michael Bugeja. He's the Distinguished Professor of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Iowa State University of Science and Technology. Michael has a bachelor's degree from St. Peter's College, a master's of science in mass communication from South Dakota State University, and a Ph.D. in English from Oklahoma State. At Iowa State, he was for 14 years the director of the Greenlee School of Journalism and Communication. And he teaches on media ethics, technology, and social change. He's published numerous books, book chapters and articles. His latest book, if I'm not mistaken, is out of Oxford Press, Interpersonal Divide in the Age of the Machine. Looks very interesting. He's also a prolific essayist. For example, he has dozens of articles in Inside Higher Ed. I went on their website just this morning to sort of get a count, and I searched for his name, and there were pages and pages of them. So it's you know, he can tell you how many, but most recently he published an essay, Politics, Policies, and Practices for Associate Professor Advancement, and it was that essay that made Karen Cousins and I interested in reaching out to him and seeing if he would speak to us here. He's a winner of the Iowa Newspaper Association Distinguished Service Award in 2017. And if I'm not mistaken, he's also an accomplished mandolin player.
Yeah, I played with Garth Brooks.
Well, there we go. So there's some stories there. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Michael, and we're really pleased to have you here this afternoon.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming to. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just start the process here and from the beginning. And as you can see, there's the title, A Culture of Gratitude, and we have a lot to cover today. There are departmental strategies, dossier collaboration, roles and responsibilities. One of the reasons, you know, after I talked to Karen and Gordon and Julie, I could give a presentation on best P&T practices, but then it occurred to me, and this resulted in this article, that there is so much that has to come before the P&T process, and that involves the department and how that department operates and what its culture is. Because almost everything that affects promotion and tenure, not only for assistant professors, but for associates trying to become full professors, happens at the departmental level. And so we're going to start with departmental strategies, then we're going to look at the dossier, and then we're going to look at roles and responsibilities of mentorship. It's, as you can see, there are many components to this, but it's a step-by-step process that I think can improve the culture of any unit. So here are the departmental strategies. We're going to be talking today about gratitude and how that's different from gratification. And if we want to take a look at how do we create a celebratory culture in which everyone appreciates the role of everyone else, you have to take a look at operational basics, advancement components. How are faculty meetings run? I mean, the faculty meetings can set the morale for just about anything. And then the importance of transparency, not only in the P&T process, but almost in every phase of policies that impact the P&T process, and that would be annual reviews, rewards, and recognition. So all that is the foundation of P&T policies, and that's based on shared governance. We're going to have to take a close look at sharing governance and what that really means. So operational basics. Now, P&T advice, no matter how practical or progressive, is going to be based on that foundation. And if you don't have that foundation, you can end up with what I have here. Faculty meetings are disorganized, they're polarizing, annual reviews may lack standards or consistency or equity across the genders and faculty ranks. Awards may seem arbitrary or preferential. And when that happens, mentorship usually is non-extant, but if it is, it's unrewarded. So we've got to take a look at how do we build the foundation for an effective promotion and tenure process. So when we say sharing governance, I said this from the beginning when I had mentioned to Gordon and to Julie that I came to Iowa State University in 2003, from Ohio University. The school here was in turmoil. It was in receivership at the provost's office, and there were calls for it to be shut down. And one of my first things that I did was I rearranged the faculty meeting. And I said to the faculty, they're called faculty meetings for a reason. They're not called director meetings. They're not called chair meetings. Okay, so if the chair alone sets the agenda rather than standing committees, P&T is going to suffer, and the processes that lead to P&T are going to suffer. And what I mean about transparency and sharing governance is that there should be maybe 4 standing committees. Be careful you don't have 5, 6, 7, 8 committees, because then you're not going to have any mentorship because everybody is in service in committees. One of the things we did here was streamline the committees. We had 8, we got it down to 4. But the chairs of the standing committees, some were picked by the faculty, some were picked by the director, but the chairs of the standing committees, then my administrative staff created what we called the Directors Advisory Committee. We followed Robert's Rules of Order. Every motion had to be in writing, and it had to be advanced through a standing committee. In other words, you couldn't show up at a faculty meeting, raise your hand, make a motion, because that catches everybody by surprise. So you want to make the faculty meetings as consistent as possible. So for instance, if I wanted to make a new policy, I would have to go through my Director's Advisory Committee. And if it was a curricular policy, I'd have to go through curriculum committee. The thing about that the chair doing that, it establishes trust. And more than that, it doesn't surprise anybody. When you go to, and then the agenda had to be distributed to everyone along with any handouts 1 week in advance of the meeting. So everybody has time to figure out what's going on and how it affects them. So no surprises in faculty meetings. And then, the idea that P&T is part of this process. So you're building trust at that very foundation of a faculty meeting. Now, deans tend not to like what I did, right? Deans really want their agenda to be facilitated through the department chairs or directors faculty meeting. But what I said is, we'll put everything through our committee so that if it has support, you will know it has support. It's not somebody trying to ram it through. Now, sometimes this became very important. I'll give you an example. We have the first, for 20 years now, we've had First Amendment Day at the Greenlee School, and it was underwritten by newspapers and media corporations, but then they withdrew support. So I had to make a difficult decision on how do we put First Amendment Day back on the agenda, which costs about $8,000 to $10,000. Now, the Koch Foundation wanted to fund this. Rather than my putting this through, I said to the advisory committee, do you want this or do you not? We either stop First Amendment Day or we accept this grant. There's no strings attached. We get to call all the shots, no agendas, but it's ours. They said yes. Then we took it to the faculty of the whole. They said yes. This is the type of structure that prevents toxic environments. Now, if it were the other way around, then I said, well, you know what, I took this grant and that's how we're going to fund it. Without faculty buy-in, it was going to affect morale. It was going to affect everything. But you lay it out. And I said to them, I said, listen, just say no and it's off the table and I'll say no. But this is the type of shared governance that actually facilitates the dean's agenda while building support for it. Now, if the dean asks us to do something and the faculty disagree, then we find a common ground to discuss the situation. And discussion always leads to some sort of consensus. Then we have to take a look at what gratification culture means. Gratification culture is about oneself, where gratitude is about others. Gratification culture is competitive, exclusive, and fleeting. It's like, I had to go through these many hoops when I got tenure. I had to go through these many hoops when I got promotion, and I'll be darned if I'm going to let you. That kind is the other thing is I became a senior professor, or I became a full professor. And I'm proud of myself. Well, by all means, you should be proud of yourself. But gratification culture then doesn't get the shared appreciation of your colleagues. So what happens is you're in constant search for more gratification because it's fleeting. Gratitude culture, which we'll learn about, is long lasting. So chairs and senior professors may be self-satisfied, may be they're looking at we had that here, and I had to fix it when I first came here. Faculty considered themselves gatekeepers. We weren't going to let a person who did qualitative research through the process because we're science and technology, we're quantitative. No, that's not fair. Okay, I am not going to let this person advance because I don't appreciate her scholarship. In other words, journalism should be a profession. It shouldn't be about quantitative data. All that stuff is part of gratification culture. Now, this is the type, this actually comes from an article. I'm not, but this was an article in Forbes about what makes a toxic environment. Constant criticism, passive-aggressive feedback, victimization, negativism, narcissism, and micromanagement. And boy, that was what I came into in 2003. Okay, the first thing I did, and we're going to talk about transparency, and I'll give you an idea. So I called a director's advisory committee meeting, and I came with my laptop and I put it down on the table. And I said, okay, tell me what's wrong. And then everybody started making their complaints, and I started typing. And they said, well, what are you doing? I said, I'm typing everything you said. Why are you doing that? I said, it's because I'm going to share it to the faculty. This is an open meeting. Everybody's going to know what your complaints are. And as soon as I said that we're going to take minutes and it's going to be shared with everyone, all that negativism they started to second guess. Do I really want to say this? And have Professor A, Professor B, Professor C. So you'll see that transparency really does work. Now, gratitude culture is collaborative, inclusive, and enduring. It requires transparency, which I talked about, equity, inclusion, and above all, mentorship. I want to talk about the importance of equity. Now, we spend a lot of time, as I hope you do, on diversity and inclusion. But without equity, you're going to end up with a toxic environment. You have to have all three. You have to have diversity, inclusion, and equity. All right, so when I came here, I found out some female professors were making 21% less than the men. That is unacceptable, okay? And so what I had to do is work with the dean so we didn't have that continual salary compression. So we worked with the dean. I said, this is going to help retention. It's going to help our efforts in diversity and engagement. But I looked at, we gave everybody an equity raise, on some of the women on staff got 21% raises. That's what we had to do in order to make this a level playing field. Now, gratitude involves so you have to start solving some of these problems at the base level. And then we had, it affects all ranks. We did something else, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Assistant professors were, once a month before our faculty meeting, there would be what we call the Greenlee Roundtable. And all the assistant professors would go to that roundtable. And I, as director, and the senior faculty would take a session each month. We would start by saying, what are you doing in research? What are you doing in teaching? What are you doing in scholarship or service? But we focused on research, and every session had to be about P&T and the advancement for your midterm review and your final review. Now, the beauty of this was that everybody was involved in mentoring through this roundtable. But here's what happened. And we actually used the term, when you graduated from the Greenlee Roundtable and became an associate professor, you probably are going to serve on P&T, and you know everyone's work ethic, you know everyone's research, because you were part of that group, and that group would share methodologies. And it still today is a key component of inclusion and engagement. So this is the part that inspires civility and collegiality, and it's just having the director and the senior professors, members of P&T, the dean at the P&T at the provost's office, they would come to these monthly meetings and establish, everything that we did was about advancement at those roundtables. P&T policies are formulated in faculty meetings. They must adhere to the faculty handbook. Annual reviews document trajectory. The whole idea of annual reviews is so important as you get to the P&T process. Faculty awards showcase impact and status, and writing matters. And we're going to spend a whole second section on writing the dossier. But those are the components of advancement. Now, when we tend to look at annual reviews as just a year-to-year thing. But when you're looking at 5 to 6 annual reviews as part of the P&T dossier, you can see why the annual review process is germane to promotion and tenure. Now, what we do here is we make sure we have a template, that everyone knows what that template's going to be and how they're going to fill it out. And for instance, we ask on teaching, on assessment, we ask for direct measures or indirect measures. Everyone has to fill out that same template, but they know in advance what that template is. And we meet, and I used to provide, now I'm a faculty member, but it's still my successor, Michael Dahlstrom, follows this as well. There's a letter about outcomes, achievements, areas for improvement. The faculty get to respond in writing to the analysis. Both chair and professors sign that document. And then after that, the assistant professors meet with their mentors for feedback. So this whole process is out there, so everyone knows what's expected of them and when it's expected of them. The annual review process. The award process is something that many people don't believe is part of P&T, but it certainly is. It documents impact and status. Now, when the chair or the director is the sole person who nominates people, you get complaints about preferential treatment. So what we do is that the college, and our college has maybe 20 awards, and the university has maybe 15 awards. So what we do is we create a Qualtrics survey, and we put the qualifications of each award, and then we list every faculty member who qualifies for that award. In other words, like for early achievement in teaching, you have to be there for 5 years, all right? Or for under 40. So anyone who fits the criteria, we put under there. That goes out, and then faculty, and we even have the staff vote too, because the staff, we treat the staff very important. Adjuncts or term faculty, staff, they all get to vote. And if 1/3 of the respondents put a name down, that goes to P&T committee and to our staff writer, our staff person, and we create the award packet. The person who is nominated doesn't do the work. We do it for them. But the interesting thing there is how many of our professors won awards. I mean, I think the last time, and when you win an award, your name is dropped from that award. In other words, if you win an award, the next year your name is dropped. So, and then we have a list at the end of this Qualtrics of all the awards that we must have, since I've been here in the past, under my directorship, we had something like 30 awards that were won. We take the award process very seriously and collectively, so that there's no indication of preferential treatment or bias. And then mentor facilitation. It's one thing to be nominated and another thing to get support letters. This is where the mentor really has to come in. If your department lacks good mentors, that process founders. Sometimes, and I've seen this when I've been an external reviewer for universities, the honors and awards segment of the dossier is blank. You know, that's so sad, because when you win an awards, particularly external awards, that documents your status in the discipline. That documents impact. Awards are fundamental to advancement, and yet we put them over here. We put annual reviews over here, and we put P&T over here. So what we're doing today is we're trying to align all these things so that you have the most impactful dossier that you can have. I think that's so important that the mentors are the gatekeepers of this whole process. Now we talk about P&T procedures. Now every institution has different rules about whether or not the candidates can see external letters. But we're going to assume for this session that the external letters are confidential. We'll just assume, even though in many institutions they're not. We're going to assume, because I'm not so concerned about things we can't change. If the external letters are, if the candidate can see external letters because that's part of your process, that's fine. But here's the part that I think is very important beyond the external letters, is what's the first letter that the candidate should see? The first letter that invites scholars to evaluate the candidate. There are two letters. The first is, we want you to evaluate the candidate. The second is, explains how to view the dossier. Those are two letters. They have to be in a template manner. Now, what we do in that first letter is that the candidate, and this is pretty routine, the candidate submits possible external reviewers, the P&T submits their reviewers, it goes to the chair. That whole process is important. But how you invite people, that's where the bias and the prejudice come in. And then how you explain the dossier is the second place where mistakes happen. So ours, the whole faculty gets to see how we invite and how we explain. And that is matter of fact. Here's what the faculty handbook says. You have been selected by the P&T committee as a person whose scholarship might qualify you to judge this other person. So all that is very formal and very factual, no impartial bias. Like, this is a person who has worked so hard for associate director. That stuff doesn't happen. So I think the whole idea of that Netflix, The Chair, is just totally out of whack where you get this. But if your letters misstate standards or imply a candidate is worthy or unworthy and a challenge arises, then you're going to be dealing with lawyers. All right, dossier collaboration, establishing the bonds. So this is the type of process that I think works really well. You have the mentor involved in critiquing the dossier. We're going to talk about theme-based writing. Themes are so important. First drafts, second drafts, revisions, communicating impact, forecasting future scholarship, and the summary of best practices. And I made a handout for all these best practices. Thematic dossiers. I want to spend some time on this. A mentor acts as an editor and the protege as the author, right? All parts of the dossier should align and complement each other, teaching, service, and research. Well, how do you align that? You align it with a theme. The dossier should have a theme associated with impact. And to identify a theme, you say, yes, two questions. What is your research or teaching about? That's the topic. What is it about really is the theme. External reviewers already know what the topic is, but they remember themes. And that's going to be a key component in the dossier. So I'll give you an example down here. And what's interesting about themes is that we make a concerted effort to have thematic statements throughout the teaching, thematic statements throughout service, thematic statements throughout research. And what happens is we see external reviewers, they believe that they don't know that we have done this in the writing, and they say, this is great. And they start talking about theme. They're not talking about topic anymore. They're talking about theme. So here's some examples. I try to help students find their purpose in life. Theme, self-discovery. And it should be 1 or 2 words. A theme is 1 or 2 words. It's not 5 words. If you're using 4 or 5 words, it's a topic. I want advisees to believe in their abilities. Theme, confidence. Here's for scholarship. I want to inform advertising executives about data science, innovation. So these thematic statements are going to really ring through. Now this is, I was the mentor of our director right now. His name is Michael Dahlstrom. He took over my position. And I was also his mentor when he was an associate professor. And he's given us permission to show you how I interacted with him. Okay. Now he starts his scholarship is science communication and the importance of narrative in the dissemination of science. So he writes, compelling stories about science can motivate people to, and I'm starting to edit this at this point, engage and respond to relevant problems facing society. Yet while science plays a unique role in society, providing the best available evidence for policy choices, understanding the world and informing citizens' daily lives does not hold any intrinsic advantage in creating captivating stories for the Right now, I am so bored. And I write, give examples of successful stories and then failed ones. Show that you know the discipline. So what he's doing actually is he's writing for an academic audience. I don't have time as an external reviewer to decipher and translate academic jargon. Just tell me in as impactful way as possible what your piece is about. So look at the improvement in the second draft. A scientific study finds that climate change is negatively impacting U.S. agriculture, but your uncle who farms over 800 acres says he hasn't noticed any change in the past 30 years. These two formats of information, the generalized aggregate of science versus the particular narrative of the individual, often clash with society. Science prides itself on discounting anecdote and upholding the data, but audience find the narrative more engaging and often more persuasive. All of a sudden, everything is cleaned up and I'm interested now in his subject matter. So then we get to the revision process here. Now I'm telling him to infuse themes. He says, overall, you will have to document trajectory that will keep rising over the years, or reviewers will think you're not ready. Detail specific articles you intend to do around the theme of engagement and so on. So now we start the revision process by inserting our theme and thematic statements. And these are going to be echoed back, particularly in the future impact area. So the things that I want you to remember here are trajectory, impact, and future plans. Those three components are what make a successful dossier. So you're going to document your influence by research, department, teaching scores, advisees, and so forth. Include citations for Web of Science or H-Index. Share success stories about your advisees, include their letters if you have an appendix section. Mention service. All this documents impact. But this is the part of the dossier that really is one of the most important and one of the least tended to, and that is future plans. Before we give associate professor full professorship, we want to know, is she going to, or he or they, are they going to continue producing? And at the assistant to associate, how are you going to get to that next rank? So what we do, what we advise is that under future plans, you have abstracts of work that you're going to be doing in keeping with your position responsibility statement to achieve that next level, or to show the external reviewers that you're going to make a continuing impact in your area of expertise. That is so very important. So and I've given a handout for this. I don't need to go over it here because you will have a handout that you can distribute, but this is the whole summary of best dossier practices. Now we get to roles and responsibilities. So creating the culture. We're going to look at chair responsibilities, mentor responsibilities, candidate responsibilities. How do we make this a communal experience in your unit? So the chair responsibility is uphold the importance of tenure to constituents. I don't know if your departments have advisory committees or society of alumni and friends, but those groups are real important as influencers. The chair should be able to explain to constituents the importance of tenure, which is under attack in so many states. There was a bill in Iowa to end tenure. It was defeated, but I'm not sure that's going to be defeated again. We have post-tenure review. So the chair's responsibility is to champion the P&T process to constituents, create venues for protege roundtables, mentor pairings, encourage associate professors to seek mentor partnerships. There is a resistance by associate professors to say, I need a full professor as a mentor. The chair's responsibility is to lessen that resistance, because once you do that, you have an ally at an upper rank. That is so very important. The idea of gratitude culture says, I earned this, I don't need anybody else. Yes, you do, if you want to become a full professor. So that the associate and mentor professor. Look, I was the mentor to the person who took my job as director. Okay, that's important to do, to establish that continuity. Affirm shared governance and transparency in faculty meetings, annual review procedures, and award nominations. Work collaboratively with P&T committees on wording for external review solicitation. Share templates with the candidates. Thank external reviewers for effort with formal letters and copy their supervisors, deans, and provosts. Make this an important component of their service. And then celebrate your candidates along with the mentors of those candidates who have achieved advancement. When you come to mentor responsibilities, schedule regular meetings with your proteges. Now, what I did as a mentor is I not only scheduled meetings with my proteges, I asked for an external mentor in the candidate's discipline from another university. I actually got that done. For instance, Tracy Luksch is a media historian, and I paired her up with Marilyn Greenwald, a media historian at Ohio University, so that if she had questions about what I was saying about her discipline, she can always go to the external mentor. And I made sure that the director of Marilyn Greenwald knew that she was getting credit for serving as an external mentor throughout the 5 years or 6 years of that. Invite proteges to collaborate on research projects with you. Participate in P&T roundtables and seminars. Keep track of changes to P&T policy. Sometimes when full professors earn that, they stop keeping track. That is wrong to do. You're going to be a mentor and make sure everyone knows what those changes are. It could be changes in deadlines, and deadlines really affect everyone, particularly in the summer. Explain the processes for midterm and mandatory reviews and post-tenure if you have it, as we do. Remind mentees about deadlines for dossiers. Help hone the language of the dossier, and celebrate successful cases and letters to proteges, copying the chair and the dean too, if you'd like, and mention the value of mentorship in departmental climate. The candidate has to really be focused on scholarship while teaching effectively. Attend roundtables and seminars. Come prepared to meetings with mentors. Ask questions about progress. How am I doing? Research, process, share ongoing research. Consider collaboration to establish a strong bond. Update your content and vita every month. And what we do is we have tabs 2 and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2 in the dossier. I tell my mentees, keep filling those out. So you're not doing it just when you're coming up. In other words, update your Vita, update tabs 1 and 2. And then all of a sudden that keeps everybody on track to the goal. What's that goal? And it's not, oh my gosh, I'm inundated with work. How am I going to get this dossier done? It's in your file folder already. Work with mentors and editors so that drafts of dossier reads crisply, factually, and thematically. Express gratitude as occasion arises for the mentor-mentee partnership. So gratitude is a communal experience. Chairs get to appreciate the improvements to policies, procedures, and their own affirmation by the faculty in annual reviews. Mentors appreciate collegiality, climate enhancement, proteges thankful for accomplishments in future, faculty retention rate rises, departmental reputation shines, and of course, least we forget, students are the beneficiaries. Now, this article will be coming out in the winter 2022 edition. When that link comes, I'll send it to Julie, Karen, and Gordon. So that's my presentation. And I think I did it in less than 45 minutes to leave time for any questions that you might have.
You did, and you got in great time. And we do already have one question in the chat, and that is, how many themes, as you're writing narratives, how many themes are appropriate to take on?
How many mentees is appropriate to take?
No, how many themes?
How many themes?
Talking about themes.
Okay, all right. This is a really great question. It's a great question, and it has a specific answer that many people don't like. All right, so let's just start. In your position responsibility statement that you should have, do you have position responsibility statements in your university? What your duties are?
So we have annual assignment letters.
Okay, so I've always advocated for position responsibility statements, so everybody knows what they're doing. For instance, our PRS, a faculty member might say, I'm teaching two courses. 40% of my time is going to be dedicated to research, 40% is dedicated to teaching, and 20% is dedicated to service. In my research, these are my main areas of research. And I argue against 3. 2 is tops, 1 is great. Okay. You know, the problem is you start being a generalist, we're not going to get anybody to external review you because it could be anybody. So what we say, for instance, is with me, it would be, I'll use me use myself as an example. My main areas are media ethics and technology and social change. And my research shows how technology and social change affects what we consider disciplinary norms in journalism. All right, so I tie them both together. And then I know that those 2 are going to be the main areas of research. Now, when it gets to the P&T committee, if they're assigning people outside of those areas, and sometimes I've seen P&T committees do this to be vengeful, they'll take a qualitative person and they'll have quantitative people in one area that's really kind of outside their discipline. All right, so that's important. For the humanities, it even becomes more important. For historians, for English teachers of comparative literature, creative writing, those qualitative humanities that produce books, they say, okay, I produced a book or 2 books. Well, what is the data associated with that? You have data associated with publications of books. You have acceptance rates at your publishers. That's number 1. That tells a lot. You have presentations that emanate from your research, for instance, or articles that emanate from your research. World Catalog can say how many libraries have bought your book, any Kirkus reviews. It's amazing what you can do in documenting your impact. But the point is to have, and this is where the chair and mentor really have to work to, and this is the beauty of those roundtables. because in those assistant professor roundtables, when a person came in and said, oh, I want to do a little bit here and I want to do a little bit there and a little bit over there, we say right at the time, no, pick one, pick two. Let's nail this down. And then they're seeing that every assistant professor is going through the same process. Those Greenlee roundtables are so imperative in building a culture of gratitude. Does this help address that question?
I think so. And it's a great segue to a question that I had, which was about those Greenlee roundtables. How did you all maintain attendance at those? Was it mandatory or?
At the roundtables or the faculty meetings?
The roundtables.
So the mentors told the assistant professors to be there. You know, and if they weren't there, what we did is remember that transparency thing I put down? So in the beginning, we put who is there, who is absent, right in the minutes. The minutes were shared because we felt that sharing the minutes lets everybody know what maybe new standards might be coming down from the dean or things of that nature. So the minutes were shared with everybody, but we had who was there, who was absent. Now, if a person is, we never had a case of anybody actually being consistently absent. And what we would do is when they got promotion and tenure, we'd have a big cake for them. We'd have a celebration for them. And I told them from the outset, you just got your Ph.D. All right, when they come in, you got your Ph.D. The Greenlee Roundtable, we're going to be your Ph.D. advisors to get tenure and promotion. And the committee is going to be your, and the professors at the next rank are going to be your committee. So the process that you already know about how to get your P&T, we're going to incorporate in advancement. We never had, and of course we've had some people who, you know, actually we actually did have somebody. We had a professional who didn't want to do research. And we kept on saying, if you don't do any research, we're Carnegie One Institution of Science Technology, it's not going to get past the dean. And that person eventually left because I would rather have a person leave than fail, you know, and I could find a better fit for that person. I'll recommend that person for maybe an institution that is looking for professional journalism. So we're a school of journalism within a college of liberal arts and sciences. I don't have a professional school. In other words, if it were Syracuse or Missouri, then that person of practice, then that would have been okay. But I've got to prepare them for the chemists and the physicists who are going to say there are no grants here. There's no research here. So ours is a little different, but we really never had any problem with the roundtable attendance. And we scheduled it the hour before the faculty meeting. So they're going to come in for the faculty meeting anyway. And what we always did, you don't have to do it, you can look at Inside Higher Ed under the title called Cooking for the Faculty, is I would make the lunches for the faculty so that they would come to lunch when they had it.
Food is often a good motivator for faculty attendance.
If you read it, it's called Cooking for the Faculty. It's really hard to be bitter when you're eating the director's food, right? But it established a kind of thing where they were looking forward to see what's on the menu today. And I felt that given my salary, it's my responsibility. If I'm going to have a meeting during the lunch hour, I'm going to prepare the food for them or buy the food for them. So sometimes I didn't have time. I'd give $50, $75 for that faculty meeting, and then we'd have food at it. This is so that people don't come after teaching without time for lunch. They're coming on a Friday typically because that's when we would have them. And this is all about caring. You not only care about yourself. This is a hard thing for administrators to learn. Your job is not always pleasing the dean. Your job is making sure that your faculty has paths to career advancement. That's your main job as a chair or a director, not anything else. I mean, you're always thinking about how can I help this faculty member, even if that faculty member doesn't like you.
Right.
You have to show that you're fair and equitable with everyone. And sooner or later, the complainers and the maximizers of discussion, they're not going to be listened to because they're going to be seen as holding everybody back. And they're the ones that stop coming to faculty meetings. And one less thing.
So one of the things that I think many of our associate professors here experience is, as soon as they make that jump to the associate professor with tenure, they suddenly become the victims of service. They get asked to do a lot of service. I suppose the expectation is we can add this service load to them now because we don't have to worry about them getting their research done for promotion and tenure. And that may be slowing or hindering some of our associate professors to make that jump to full. It also gets them on a service track where they do end up getting tapped for things like being a department chair, which is fine, and they are excellent servants of the faculty, but it also that there again exacerbates the process of them getting to make that jump to full.
This impacts women, particularly women of color, more than anything. And okay, this is how I solved that problem at the Greenlee School. All right, it takes a lot of courage to do it. I had mentioned it briefly before we started our session. We had 8 committees. All right, that's too many committees. We had 9 emphases. That's too much to teach. We had 9 broadcast journalism courses, and then we had 8 magazine journalism courses. And our diplomas didn't say broadcast journalism. Our diplomas didn't say magazine journalism. So we reduced. I told the faculty, you got to streamline the curriculum. Number one, we cut out 1/3 of the faculty. If it wasn't on the diploma, we were not, in other words, and prerequisites, we took a look at prerequisites. Why are you having a prerequisite for this if you don't need this course to prepare for this one? All right, prerequisites, we got rid of a lot of prerequisites because that's stymies commencement, the path to commencement. We reduced committees. Now, for instance, I'll give you an example. We had a scholarship committee, a technology committee, and an undergraduate committee. So we made a technology subcommittee under undergraduate, and then we made those subcommittees, right? And then members of undergraduate served on the subcommittees. So we took 3 committees with the same amount of people. We had 1 committee, and you know what? Service really declined because people were not trying to control everything. So on scholarships, undergraduate handled scholarships. We didn't need a separate committee of 5 people there and 5 people here. Same with technology, because all that was under undergraduate education. We put that there. We have a long-range planning committee. They're just responsible for a long-range plan once every 5 years, and they're responsible for the governance document that we have. Well, we have that as a standing committee because it's important. P&T is important, and graduate is important. That's it. Those are all the committees that we have. And our workload went from 3-4 to 2-2 for tenured or tenure eligible, and 3-4 for term faculty who are not responsible for scholarship. But the whole thing everything got reduced. So there was time for advising our students. There was time for mentorship. So the big problem that we see with associate professors is that they're given the tasks as soon as they come. Now, if you only have 4 standing committees and you have 5 associate professors and 5 full professors, you can assign people equitably, and not only women for diversity or people of color for diversity. You have to figure. Now, we did feel that diversity, I had been arguing for this, and you could look it up on Iowa State. You can see this in Inside Higher Ed. I have been arguing since 2004 that every department should have a standalone diversity committee. I have not won that argument. Okay. The reason why I think that's important, it's important for retention. It's very important in Iowa, where we have 90 to 95% of the populace is Caucasian. and you have to figure out, how am I going to be diverse and inclusive and equitable at Iowa State University? And that takes a diversity committee who not only documents the scholarship, but is out there in recruitment, it is out there in retention, it is out there as mentors. This is now I wanted that for every single department in the university. I've got it for about 1/3, but I can't get, there's a lot of reluctance in the sciences about doing things like this. I just speak candidly, and but I'm still on it.
Well, I want to leave time for others to ask questions. You can ask, you just unmute yourself and ask them, or you can put them in the chat, and Julia or I will ask them.
Yeah, on theme, I want to hit that again. I mean, be careful with theme. You want theme to echo. So like two topics, one theme. Let's just take me for example, media, ethics, and technology and social change. My theme would be, let's say, innovation. That can apply to both of them. But you want that theme to come through and unify your two, and three is really pushing it. 3 areas of specialty is really pushing it. I don't see anything, any other thing in the chat. Do you? Am I missing anything?
Nope, I don't see anything. We've got a very quiet group this afternoon. Julie, did you have a question?
No, I'm good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very. This is so important to take back to all of the chairs and directors. It's just so very important that we build that foundation of gratitude first, you know, and I also do it in my classes as well. We talk about, and I'll mention this and then we'll cut out. There's a great book that I hope you get to read. It's called The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt. Has anyone read that? It's the science of happiness is very interesting, because genetically, we all have a happiness set point. In other words, we'll get promotion and tenure and we're happy, and then 2 weeks later, we come back to that set point. The only way to increase your genetic set point, there's 2 ways to do it. One, to reinvent yourself. That's a long-term way of doing it. And the other thing is to show gratitude. Gratitude really is the key in lifting up your spirits and having an inclusive and engaged faculty. So we have something that we call Good News from Greenlee. I started this. So every month we ask the faculty, tell me your good news. It could be teaching enhancements, it could be publications, it could be presentations. And under every single faculty member, they have their good news from Greenlee, and we send it out to all our constituents. We send it to all the administrators. We send it to the deans. We send it to our alumni. We send it to our benefactors. And those first who scoffed at the idea, then they started to see that those who were reporting their successes each month, those were the ones that were getting lots of encouragement and affirmation. So Good News from Greenlee was our mode of gratification. So when I came here, there was always bad news. So the first thing I said is Good News from Greenlee. And now it's on our website. You can go to the website and you can see everybody who has contributed something. And that's just one way of having all your constituents, including your students, which we send it to, celebrate their professors.
That's great. I do think that Dan Richard had a question. Maybe you want to go ahead, Dan?
Yeah, and this one, I appreciate your comments. It's been really insightful, and I especially like you addressing the more structural issues. This one is tough for me, and I'm hoping you have some advice, but if not, you know.
I do my best.
Yeah, do your best. So we sometimes find ourselves in situations where there has been shared governance. There's been a discussion about promotion and tenure guidelines, but the result of those is you're probably hearing my son play piano in the background, sorry. The result of that is not necessarily a sound and reasonable policy. So for example, we see sometimes in promotion and tenure guidelines where there'll be a statement, you get rewarded for having student satisfaction surveys of teaching above average. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense because 50% of the faculty are going to be below average, no matter how high the ratings are. So
I had to deal with that question.
yeah,
I dealt with that question specifically.
Good. Any insights you have would be great.
Yeah. What makes good teaching? First of all, the dean just wants a grade on teaching. She doesn't necessarily need it broken down into each category of what teaching is. If you don't have a departmental template of what makes good teaching, that you have a faculty meeting. In the faculty meeting, you say, what makes good teaching? And you have a discussion. The director or the chair takes down what makes good teaching. How is that expressed in our day-to-day chores? All right, so this is what we came up with, and it was just amazing. We're an accredited program. And as an accredited program, we have to have specific data for about everything. But institutions like yours also has an accreditation that they have to live up to. What makes good teaching? It's not only the teaching evaluations, because half will be above the curve. You're absolutely right. So we put about assessment measures. We talked about perceptions of quality and data of quality. So an indirect measure would be, I've gotten so many people into graduate school. I've gotten all these comments about the new course that I did. So that's, and even though my scores were low, I instituted these new more rigorous tests in there. So that's part of, but also, how have you updated your course? Now we're all updating our courses. So that's part of assessments. Not only do we have a section of the template about assessment measures, course improvements, outside presentation, in other words, you brought a professional or a scholar in to review your class, guest lectures, all that stuff comes under teaching, all the advising that you've done. All that comes into, so we had a faculty meeting of what makes effective teaching. It's not only the student evaluation. So you can have a bad student evaluation, but you have assessments. I want to talk about assessment measures. And then what we do each year is we put all of the indirect measures for the whole school and all of the direct measures for the whole school. That comes under our accreditation policy, and we forward that to the dean. And they know that, oh, in other words, when they're looking to make cuts, they're not going to make cuts on us because we're doing all these other things. Does that help you, Dan? Is it Richard or?
Yes, that does help. Thanks.
That's great. Great question. Great answer. If there are any other questions, please raise your hand, or if not, it just remains for me to thank you, Michael, for taking the time to speak to our colleagues here. This is wonderful. You've given us a lot to chew on. We really appreciate the handout as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been so enjoyable. I send all of you my heartfelt greetings to be safe, be well, and prosper.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.